Russia's defense ministry has released a new video showing missiles being launched from warships and a submarine in the Mediterranean, targeting Islamic State positions in Syria.
Russian intelligence is tracking ISIL fighters who've been trying to escape their stronghold in Raqqa through the so-called southern corridor. That's pretty much their only way out, as the city has been surrounded by US-led coalition forces for quite some time now. From what we understand, the fighters have been trying to go from Raqqa to Palmyra via the Hama province, and that's where they've been targeted in the latest series of airstrikes from Russia. Now, as ISIL continue to lose ground in Raqqa, this is certainly not the first time we've heard terrorists manage to escape the city. In fact, there have been reports last month of the Kurds, one of the main forces fighting ISIS, opening up a corridor, allowing the terrorists to leave the city of Raqqa. The Kurds have denied this, but the Ministry of Defense in Russia have confirmed seeing the movement of large ISIL convoy moving from Raqqa towards Palmyra. In these latest images released, it shows 6 cruise missiles being launched from 2 warships and a submarine currently located in the Mediterranean. And the strikes managed to destroy an ISIL command center and several ISIL weapon stockpiles in the Hama province as well. Now, Turkish and Israeli forces that are also operating in the area, they have been informed about the strikes in advance, but nothing is said about communicating with the coalition forces, as on Monday, Russia has halted the agreement of military cooperation in Syrian airspace with the U.S. after they downed a Syrian government fighter jet near Raqqa on Sunday.
Well, let's go live now to award-winning journalist Martin Jay. Discuss this further. Thanks for joining us, Martin, here. It seems the Russians and the Americans, two similar aims, perhaps, very different methods, though. What are the differences mainly in their two approaches to fighting ISIL?
Good question. I think the differences are quite vast. If you look at both of their strategies and the ethos of both of these big players, one, on the American side, there is a two-pronged approach, which is confusing and conflicting at the best of times. America wants to support a large demographic of forces, not its own, of course, but others, largely Kurdish, who are supposed to take over and destroy ISIS positions. But at the same time, the Americans also have their own geopolitical struggle within Syria against the Assad regime. And of course, let's not also forget the other thing which is quite interesting is that their presence in Syria is entirely illegal. So if you contrast that against the Russians don't have such a complicated idea towards what they're doing or what their objectives are. They simply want to hit ISIS and hit ISIS hard so that that extremist group can be completely eradicated. They're also invited and they're also prepared to put their own soldiers on the front line. So I think there's a lot of differences, and we've seen that today. And in recent days with these airstrikes, the American strikes on Raqqa seem to be quite indiscriminate and incur heavy civilian losses. They don't seem to care about feeding the extremist machine with new recruits every day, people who see their loved ones die by this indiscriminate bombing. And also, to contrast that, the Russians have been doing a very good job of striking ISIS, and as a result of these American airstrikes, which have created these rat lines, these corridors, which your correspondent alluded to earlier, those are a result of not a very efficient and not a very thorough and very serious ideology from the Americans to destroy ISIS. I've never believed that America really wants to destroy ISIS in Syria, whereas I think Russia's plans are to do just that.
Looking at the sort of battle maps of Syria, how they've chopped and changed over the last few months, the fighting terror aspect of the Syrian war seems to be moving closer to an end now. ISIS on its last legs, many would argue. What do you think's next, though, once ISIL is gone, which it inevitably will do as a field military force, so to speak? What's next with so many players there in the field?
Yeah, that's really what we all want to know, Daniel. The big question is, do all these huge international players actually stop and walk away, or is there a second agenda? Is there a second game plan there? And I think from the American position, I have no question whatsoever that there is, and it may well take some time. But I think in the longer term, as I said in my first answer, I think the Americans do have a longer term anti-Iranian agenda, and hitting proxies of Iran would be quite an attractive and quite, for them, a logical step to do. So I think that really does take away some of the mystery and some of the confusion as why America is behaving the way it is. You know, it has these airstrikes, it supports the Kurds, but at the same time and time again, we see repeated examples of skirmishes or standoffs with the Syrian regime and the Syrian regime's coalition partners like the Iranians or Hezbollah, and that gives you an indication of what the long-term goals are. But if you look carefully at Trump's long-term vision of the Middle East anyway, I mean, he has a very, very lucid idea of destabilizing Iran, and what better place to start than Syria if we are able to fast forward and look at a new picture in the next coming few weeks or coming months whereby the extremist part of the equation is completely removed.
Just speaking of the Kurds, though, and of the proxies you mentioned, obviously the US is arming the Kurds to fight ISIL. That's really irritated Turkey, who's a US ally, NATO member. I mean, where do you see that relationship developing? Because will they actually be able to get these weapons back after flooding the area with these arms? Is that realistic at all?
No, it's not realistic at all, is it? I mean, it depends on whether you believe in fairy tales or Father Christmas. I don't imagine that those arms are going to be handed back. They might get a percentage of them back, but I think they'll get a lot of excuses and a lot of far-fetched stories about those heavier guns being lost or destroyed in the confusion of war. So I don't think we should hold our breath on that. But it's the Kurdish question and who is arming them is becoming paramount in the last few days with a new Saudi crown prince in Saudi Arabia. Prince Mohammed bin Salman has told the Kurds in no uncertain terms that if he doesn't get what he wants in Qatar, which is for Turkish troops to be removed completely, that he said he might look at options on arming the Kurds themselves. So you have an incendiary situation with the Kurds in northern Syria, which has got so much more complicated in just the last few weeks with the Qatar crisis emerging, and America once again deliberating and not sure which foot to pull its camp, which to place itself in. So it straddled both camps. I mean, there was a lot of confusion just a week ago from the White House between Trump and the Pentagon over the Qatar question. So the Kurds and arming of the Kurds, it keeps coming up time and time again, and very worrying.
Right, Martin Jay, award-winning journalist, thanks for your insight today here on the Syria question on RT International.